Thank you for attending our webinar. Let's wait a little bit before everyone joins and we will start. I would like to start with some technical information. Today's webinar will be conducted in English, but a Chinese simultaneous interpretation is also available. In order to switch to Chinese translation, press the globe button at the bottom of your screen and select Chinese. If you would like to switch to English, press Original. There is a questions and answers box in your controls bar. You can type in your questions there. Our speakers will answer them at the end if we have some time left. So the topic of our webinar is clinical trials and drug registration in Russia and the Eurasian Economic Union. And now let me introduce you to our distinguished experts who will deliver valuable insights that you can use. Please meet Irina Petrova, Head of Clinical Operations at OCT, Eugenia Radkova, Head of Medical Science, Consulting and Excellence, and me, Polina Nabieva. I'm the Business Development Manager at OCT, and I will be the moderator for today. So, Eugenia, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar. We will discuss the clinical trials, drug registration, and first of all, we should start with the Eurasian Economic Union because in Russia currently all the processes of clinical trials and drug registration are regulated by the guidelines of the Union. The Eurasian Economic Union was established to provide the common market in different economic sectors, including the pharmaceutical industry. So it consists of 5 countries, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyz Republic, and the Russian Federation. And in 2014, the agreement on common principles and rules of circulation of medicine products within the Union was signed. And since then, transition period was. Polina, could you please show next slide? So, and from the 1st of January 2021, drug registration and clinical trials must comply with the Union regulations. And currently we have more than 80 regulatory guidelines, including EAEU rules for registration and expertise of medicine products for medical use. This document is very important because it contains all principles and all steps for drug registration in all countries, including Russia. Also guidelines for clinical and non-clinical studies, GLP, GMP, GCP, GVP, and other guidelines. The EAEU has its own website where you can find the legal portal with all guidelines published online. Unfortunately, most of them are in Russian language, but some of them are translated into English. Also, there is a drug database of the drugs that are approved within the Union and different registers to find relevant information. The main idea of the Union was to make the regulatory landscape very similar to the European regulatory requirements. Therefore, you will find that most of the guidelines are highly harmonized with the guidelines of the EMA, also WHO, ICH, FDA. So this makes the registration and understanding of which clinical trials is required for our region easier because the principles and the requirements are absolutely common and harmonized with the requirements of the other regulatory authorities. This refers to the study design, biostatistics, study documents, drug dossier, etc. The only process which is still regulated in each country individually, and it is so-called is still on the country level, is the process of getting the approval for the clinical trial. And also each country has its own database of approved clinical trials. And my colleague Irina will discuss more on that later. So all other processes of clinical trials and drug registration, so they they are absolutely the same in all countries of the Union. Next slide, please. So if we read and investigate very attentively the rules for registration and expertise, we will find the basic requirements. So CTD must contain data from the complete clinical development program. So the CTD must contain all the data of all the phases and all clinical trials that are needed for the drug registration. And there is one specific and particular for our region requirement. It is that at least one clinical study must be entirely or partly conducted in the EAEU country. It means that local data are needed. So, and the sponsor can choose the way of conducting the standalone local clinical study, or the way of inclusion of at least one union country in the international multi-center study is also applicable. And we recommend to follow this way because this is a money and time-saving strategy. This option is also absolutely applicable, and this data, these local data obtained within the multi-regional clinical trial, they will be absolutely applicable further for drug registration. If you have a question about what should be the study design and what should be the clinical trial, so as I said, all the requirements are absolutely harmonized with the guidelines of ICH, EMA, and other regulatory authorities in terms of the study design and the documents, their structure, their content, and so on. Next slide, please. So local data are the classical, like traditional way, and a lot of drugs were registered in Russia through the inclusion of the Russia in the multi-regional clinical trials. And by this way, sponsors submitted after that local data and obtained registration. But we have a new procedure, it is a GCP inspection. This procedure is considered to be as an alternative option for the local data, but it is absolutely new. It was not previously applied in Russia or the Union. The guidelines say that instead of doing the local study or obtaining the local data, inspection of one of the investigational site which conducted one of the trials listed in Model 5 with clinical data could be applicable for drug registration. We have very few information about that. It was announced by our regulatory authorities, but there are no group of inspectors, there are no instructions. So there is information that inspections probably will start in 2025. Therefore, so we we cannot always answer the questions about GCP inspections because we really don't know. Information is very limited. So we just see in the regulatory guidelines that the procedure looks like it's presented on the slide, that the sponsor submits the CTD to the Ministry of Health, and after that regulatory decision will be done whether local data or GCP inspection will be enough. If GCP inspection, it should be completed within the pointed timelines, and after that the decision on registration will be done. So unfortunately, there is no option of preliminary discussion or scientific advice to understand whether local data or GCP inspection will be needed. So the only way is just to submit the CTD dossier and to get the answer and to understand what is needed. Therefore, we recommend for the sponsors who are going to and who are planning to register the drugs in Russia within the 1 or 2 years to follow the classical way of conducting local study, because for GCP inspection, very limited information is known, and we actually don't know how and when it will come into force, it will work, and what will be the procedure, what will be the criteria, requirements when local data, when GCP inspection will be needed. So this is a new trend we'll see, but again, the current usual way is to get local data for drug registration. Next slide, please. So if we speak about local clinical studies, if the sponsor understands that Russia or other country of the Union would not be included in the multi-regional study, for example, the study is completed, and the standalone local clinical study is needed, which design should be considered? For chemical generics, I mean, oral dosage forms, local bioequivalence study would be enough. For vaccines, local immunogenicity study. For biosimilars, it could be a local PK phase 1 study or local phase 3 study. It depends on the product. It depends on the data available from the previous study. So it is discussed for each product individually. And for original products, also different scenarios are possible. And we see that our regulatory authorities, they're ready to discuss the bridging study, for example, for the products which are innovative, and it is sometimes just enough to conduct the PK local study just to show the PK profile is similar in the Caucasian population. So this also option becomes quite realistic for our country. If we speak about all the studies, usually they should be comparative. The sample size should be statistically justified, and we see that our regulatory authorities, they put much attention on reviewing the statistical part of the protocol. And the study design, all aspects of the study design, like comparator, choice of comparator, blinding, study endpoints, etc., they should be justified based on the ICH EMA guidelines. Next slide, please. At the same time, there are products for which local data or local study are not required. They are generic chemical drugs, which are aqueous solutions and different types of solutions, or gases, or different eye or ear drops, etc. Also, for orphan drugs, there is no need to obtain local data. All data obtained in other clinical trials that are conducted in other countries, they will be absolutely applicable for drug registration. And also sometimes for the drugs that meet criteria of special registration pathways, for them also, sometimes local data are not needed, and foreign data could be accepted for drug registration. Next slide, please. So, and you can see here on the slide which like special pathways or so-called fast track programs we have in the Union. So they are drug registration with the establishment of additional requirements, conditional drug registration in exceptional cases. Also, for some products, the expedited drug expertise could be applied. And before using these programs, we recommend to review very attentively whether the drug meets all the criteria that are listed for each type of program, because the criteria are very specific, and to get the approval using these programs, the drug must meet all the requirements that are listed in the regulatory documents for this type of studies and registrations. Next slide, please. We often get a lot of questions about the registration of herbal drugs. There is also local guidelines that which say that clinical trials are not required, but the following main criteria must be met. And as you can see, these criteria are quite strict and really quite difficult to be met. So the herbal drug uh, the safety of the herbal drug must be established during the long-standing experience for at least 10 years from the first systematic and documented use within at least 3 countries of the Union. So if the product is registered for more than 10 years in at least 3 countries of the Union, 3 countries of 5, so the procedure of registration without the clinical trials, it will be acceptable. If these criteria are not met, the registration strategies are to register the product as a dietary supplement. We do not deal with dietary supplements, our company, but there are companies that help with registration of dietary supplements in the union. Or the drugs should be registered as the usual medicine products through submission of the CTD dossier with all clinical, non-clinical data, so like a usual drug. Next slide, please. Here you can see what are the requirements for the CTD structure. So you may find that it is absolutely the same as stated in the ICHM4 guideline. So the structure has models, also if we speak about the coding of terms, MEDRA vocabulary should be used. So also the sponsor should develop a summary of product characteristics in local language for the union, and also patient information leaflet. And these documents will be published online in the database of drugs of the Eurasian Economic Union. Next slide, please. And you may see on the slide how the procedure of drug registration looks like. It includes two independent parts. The first one is GMP inspection, and the second one is review of the CTD dossier. And at the beginning, the sponsor should choose a so-called reference country. And the slide presents the strategy when Russia is chosen as the reference country, because we see that this is the most popular way. Russia is a huge market, and we have a very well-established regulatory bulk and procedures, and many sponsors, therefore, they choose Russia, the reference country. So GMP inspection is conducted by the Ministry of Industry and Trade of the Russian Federation, and this process will take about 11 months. And the dossier will be reviewed by the Ministry of Health of Russia, and at the end of this review process, the expertise report will be issued, and based on it, drug can be registered in Russia. So this process takes also about 11 months. And after that, the company may choose the way of going to the other countries of the EAEU through the recognition procedures, when just country-specific Model 1 is submitted, and the regulatory authorities of other country of the Eurasian Economic Union, they will just review the expertise report of the reference country. Therefore, the procedure takes about 100 working days. So this is just in brief how drug registration looks like. And I give the floor to my colleague Irina, who will discuss more on the clinical trials in Russia and the Eurasian Economic Union.
Thank you, Eugenia. Good afternoon, everyone who attended our webinar. Hope you find it useful. And I would like to start with the overview of clinical trial landscape and what type of clinical trials are the statistics about what type of clinical trials have been approved in Russia. And as you can see from the slide, Russia is definitely a leading country with regards to the number of approved clinical trials. And this amount from 700 to 800 clinical trials approved annually is a fairly steady amount that we observe over the last maybe 6 or 7 years. The next country with the highest number of clinical trials approved annually is Belarus, then followed Kazakhstan, and Armenia. How it can be explained is because Russia is the leading country in European Asian Union, and this is the biggest country. And of course, all our pharmaceutical companies wants to get marketing authorization in Russia first. Those who include Russia in the multinational clinical trial programs rely on good recruitment, big number of sites to be open. So in all that conditions put Russia on the first place. We have personal experience in all of these countries, and Armenia has recently joined clinical trial industry, but we can say that the dedication and the quality of investigators and the quality of work of Armenian sites is really outstanding. The only disadvantage of this country is that it is really small, so you cannot just open like 20, 30, 40 sites as you can do in Russia. For Kyrgyzstan, we don't have any data about clinical trials, so there are no ongoing trials there. If you look at the diagram about their distribution of different types of clinical trials approved in Russia, you can see that approximately 1/3 of clinical trials approved annually is international multicenter clinical trials, MRCTs. Another third is presented by bioequivalent studies done by local sponsors. Generic market in Russia is very big. Also, a substantial part of clinical trials is represented by local trials done by local Russian pharmaceutical companies. And a minor percent of local trials, only 4%, done by overseas sponsors, which confirms the idea that and the approach that foreign companies prefer the pathway of doing multinational clinical trials partially in Russia to comply with European Asian Union regulations to present local clinical trial data in the dossier. Next slide, please. And here I would like to describe the main features and conditions for doing multinational clinical trials in the European Asian Union. First of all, there is the infrastructure necessary for doing clinical trials is available. And regulations are also harmonized with ICH countries. Of course, when we talk about clinical trials, I'm mostly talking about ICH E6, ICH GCP. GCP in the European Asian Union countries is the same as in Europe and United States. Also, not in all countries, but in the leading country, in Russia, we have really quick regulatory approval, and I will tell about it a little bit later, and very attractive startup timelines. Within 4.5 months, maybe 5 months, 4 months, depending on the size of the study, you may get the first patient in milestone, starting from the moment of preparation of the package of documents for submission to the Ministry of Health. So that's faster than in the European Union, for example. In Armenia, the same. So the whole process of approval takes about 2 months. Also, the landscape of clinical trials changed a bit in 2024. So we haven't yet retrieved the statistic from Russian regulatory database of approved clinical trials in 2024. But most likely we expect that the proportion of international clinical trials of MRCTs became lower, whereas the interest of investigators and motivation of patients to take part in the clinical trials of novel, most advanced therapies is very high. It's still high. So absence of competition in MRCT area creates lower prices and also good recruitment. Russia has always been very good at recruiting, and now so we see like the outstanding figures, numbers, recruitment rates. So in Russia, you of course can get access to Caucasian population. And in these countries, the healthcare system is centralized. It means that you need to open many, many small sites. You can open just one city oncology center, for example, and can be sure that all the major part of oncology patients will go and will be like found in this one particular site, city oncology center or regional oncology center. The same system exists not only for oncology care, in oncology care, but also in cardiology, HIV, also tuberculosis and some other diseases. Investigators and site personnel are experienced in MRCTs in clinical trials, and the clinical trial data are internationally recognized. It can be confirmed by successfully passed FDA and EMA inspections. There have been a number of inspections at Russian sites. And also by the marketing authorization of drugs investigated in Russia entirely sometimes, or in a big proportion, in Europe and in the United States. And if you have a plan for marketing authorization of your drugs in Russia or in the European Asian Union, you mutually will get the compliance with the regulations by getting local clinical data, which can be obtained either through MRCT or local trial, but through MRCT, we are often asked what proportion of subjects of trial participants are needed to comply with this regulation. We say that mutually it's about 10% of sample size, but it can be more, it can be less, but the average is 10%. And I would like to emphasize that any clinical trial phase data are acceptable, not necessarily phase 3. That is why many companies come because of good recruitment, low prices. They come for the early phase trials, specifically to European Asian Union, Russia, or Belarus. So phase 2 clinical trial, phase 1 clinical trial can also be done in European Asian Union, and they will the data from this trial will be also accepted as local clinical data. Polina, next slide, please. Here you can see the busy slide, and this is the schemes of getting regulatory approval of clinical trial in different countries. I can say that in Russia and Armenia, the pathway is practically the same. The timelines are different, but still they're very fast. Like the application is done to the Ministry of Health, and then Ministry of Health will organize without our participation, the scientific expertise and ethics expertise of the submitted documents. And then after the expertise is over, the conclusions will be returned to the Minister of Health, and then Minister of Health will issue clinical trial approval. So from 2025, from January, from next year, the whole process will take 31 business days. It's less than 2 calendar months in Russia. In Armenia, it's 40 business days, meaning that it's maybe 2 months and a half, 3 months. And Armenian regulators work perfectly. We've never experienced any delays. In Belarus, the process is a little bit longer. It can be up to 4 months. And the process is consequent. So first of all, we submit the documents for scientific expertise to the Ministry of Health. After it's over, we should approve the study in local ethics committees. There is no central ethics expertise in Belarus. Then, when everything is ready, scientific expertise, local ethics expertise, so all documents, another package of documents is submitted to the Ministry of Health, and they issue clinical trial approval. In Kazakhstan, the process is also consequent and takes about 70 business days. In Kazakhstan, I can say openly that we experienced some delays in getting approval, unless like in other 3 countries. Okay, Polina, next slide, please. Here is the information with the list of documents you need to put together to submit for clinical trial approval. The easiest and simplest package is in Russia, so you need the basic study documents like protocol, investigator brochure, patient-facing materials like informed consent forms, diaries, questionnaires, etc. Also information about investigator sites, site list, and investigators' credential, expertise, and qualification, which is confirmed by curriculum vitae. Copies are sufficient. And submission in Russia from the next year will be entirely electronic. You don't need to submit paper files anywhere. So just electronic. Also very convenient and very quick. The company to be able to submit the documents, we would need the delegation letter. The company who will be performing submission will need a delegation from a Chinese sponsor, Chinese pharmaceutical company, and this delegation letter should be notarized and apostilled. In other countries, the package of documents is a little bit more like detailed, I would say. Besides the documents which I listed for Russia, in different countries, you need sometimes some additional documents for sites or for investigators. And the major difference is that you need to submit IMPD. So the information about quality and stability, which may be a little bit more complicated comparing to Russia. And in all countries, you need to submit GMP certificate. We know that Chinese companies do not have, not all of them do have GMP certificates, because the procedure for getting GMP certificate has been changed. So we have a solution for that, and we can actually, this is not a problem, I should say. We can provide information what is needed instead of GMP. And at the bottom line, you can see the approximate fees for regulatory and ethics expertise in different countries. Okay, also forgot to mention, I'm sorry, that in Russia, you need to translate all documents into Russian language. The same is required in other countries, but the volume of translation can be different. Okay, next slide, please. And to summarize my part of the presentation, I would like once again to list the key features of drug registration and clinical trials in European Asian Union countries. First of all, I would like to remind that European Asian Union requirements are largely harmonized with ICH, EMA, and FDA guidelines. That is why whenever you have a question whether the study of a particular design can be approved in Russia or other European Asian Union countries, you can refer to these guidelines and see most likely regulatory authorities in European Asian Union will require the same as EMA or FDA. Whereas clinical drug registration is harmonized among all European Asian Union member states, clinical trial approval process is country specific and different in each country. Russia is the leading country with regards to the number of clinical trials, and the data Russian sites provide are high quality, which is confirmed by regulatory inspections done inside Russia by Russian regulatory authorities and foreign regulatory authorities. And this is also confirmed by the products marketed in European and US market. And from in our opinion, and from the perspective of time and money, we believe that inclusion of European Asian Union countries in a multinational clinical trial is the most straightforward, obvious, and clear strategy. Comparing to like GCP inspection pathway, which is not yet finalized, or doing local trial, which would be more time and money consuming. That's all from my part. Lina,
Thank you so much, Irina and Eugenia, for such an insightful information. I'm sure our audience will find it quite useful. Well, so we have a few minutes left, and I would like to tell you about OCT, about today's organizer, so what to expect from us. OCT has been on the market for 20 years now, and we are very well known in the region. So a lot of companies across the globe trust our quality, they trust our expertise. During that time, we have conducted over 360 clinical trials in 29 therapeutic areas. We have 140 people on staff across the countries which we cover, because we cover not only Russia and EAEU countries, we cover some countries in Eastern Europe and in Central Europe as well. Also, it's very important to mention that the majority of people in our clinical operations team, they have either medical degree or at least degree in life science. So they are on the same page with the client, with the principal investigators, which is very important. A lot of companies look into different regions and locations, so it's very important to understand that we comply with EMA and FDA regulations. OCT has gone through 3 EMA inspections so far with no major findings. And also, please keep in mind that OCT has gone through 1 Chinese national regulatory inspection with no critical or major findings. So we have that experience. Please keep that in mind. We are always open for collaboration. And I just wanted to add that we will send you the slides after the webinar. Moving on to our experience, I already mentioned that we cover 29 therapeutic areas, and the majority falls to oncology, that's around 23%. And then we have cardiovascular, respiratory, and so on. These are top enrolling therapeutic areas from our portfolio because of the situation on the market. And of course, lots of companies come to our region for later stages, for phase 2 and phase 3. That's why the majority of our experience in phase 2 and phase 3 trials. But actually, we can cover others as well. Over 20 years, we conducted 9 own trademark conferences, including 2 in China. It's Russia-China Pharmaceutical Cooperation Forum 2023 and 2024 in June in Shanghai. It was very close to CPHI and very successful. Of course, we invite all of you to join our event next year. We invite for Chinese and Russian pharmaceutical companies to find ways for collaboration. So please come and join us in June next year. We will be happy to see you there. And of course, we will send more information regarding this event over the email. Well, so we talked a lot about OCT collaboration with Chinese companies. And also, I just wanted to show you that our case studies have been published on Fierce Biotech and other social media. So if you would like to close a look to these case studies, I will send you a link over WeChat. We also have a video project. It's called Industry Voice, and we interview experts of highest levels from pharmaceutical companies, from biotechs, and here you can see very well-known Chinese pharmaceutical companies, which we have interviewed in the past. So if you want to be in our next video, please send me your contact information, and I will reach out to you. Well, so if you have any questions regarding the topic of the webinar or our services, don't hesitate reaching out using contact details you see on the screen. So here is my WeChat ID and WeChat ID of our business development director, Wen Huan Zhang. She's located in Beijing. You can add both of us on WeChat, and we will send you all the relevant information that you may need. And I am also glad to inform you that my team, OCT team, is planning a business trip to China from today, from 16th of December to 23rd of December. And we will be in Shenzhen, Shanghai, Suzhou, and Beijing. So please feel free to schedule a meeting with us. Well, so like we have promised, I'm not sure that we have enough time right now, but maybe we can answer some questions from the very top. Well, and our first question is, how much will it cost on average for each patient in a typical study in Russia, for example, in a cancer trial? So I will ask my colleagues to help me to respond on this question.
This is a very difficult question to answer straightforwardly because each clinical trial is very individual. So I'm afraid I cannot give like any particular number because the cost will depend on the duration of subject participation, the set of study procedures, the recruitment rate also may have influence, how difficult it is to find a patient. So a number of sites involved, of course. So I would say that if you have any particular study in mind, send us a request for proposal and we can tell you the exact number, how much the trial will cost.
Thank you, Irina. Our next question is, are the blood samples required to be approved by a regulatory agency when exported to the Russian Federation?
Irina, is it about biosamples, right? I didn't get.
Yes, blood samples.
Blood samples. There is a procedure for exportation of biosamples from Russia. So there are no issues with that. So logistics works very well. The export permit takes about 1 week to receive its electronic process, and it's very well regulated.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, how can I get a slide deck? Well, so as I mentioned before, we will send you all the information using your email addresses that you've listed in the chat box. So today or tomorrow, I will send you all the information. Thank you so much for this question. And the next question is, hello, everyone. Do Russia regulatory accept first-in-human trial from a foreign sponsor?
Yes, they do accept, unless we are talking about healthy volunteers. Such study cannot be approved if it's a foreign study, foreign sponsor and healthy volunteers. If you have a study in patients, cancer patient, we very often see studies in autoimmune indications, phase 1. So that's no problem. So it can be approved.
Thank you, Irina. So it was the last question for today. And please do not hesitate. If you have more, please reach out to me or to Wen Huan directly by WeChat, and we will be glad to provide you with feedback. So thank you all so much for attending our webinar today. It was a pleasure to share our expertise with you. Thank you, Irina and Eugenia. It was a pleasure to hear your insightful information, as always.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.